You remember the exact sound, that screeching, grinding, robotic noise crawling out of the computer. You would sit there completely still, barely breathing. Because if your mom picked up the phone downstairs, it was over. An hour of downloading. Gone. The internet in the 90s was not a convenience. It was a negotiation. And then there was the Discman. Not just any Discman. The one loaded with the CD you burned yourself. Songs you picked one by one for someone specific. Someone you liked. Maybe someone you loved. You spent an entire afternoon getting the order exactly right. Because the order mattered. Because the songs said the things you couldn't. You handed it to them like it was nothing, but it was everything. Or Friday night at Blockbuster, running to the new releases shelf, praying, actually praying, that the movie you wanted wasn't already rented out. And if it was, you had to pick something else. No refunds on disappointment. That was just life. If any of that just hit you somewhere in the chest, this video is for you. Because today we're not just going to talk about 90s nostalgia, we're going to talk about what that decade actually did to your brain, the psychology it built into you without you ever realizing it, and why, in a world that never stops moving, you are wired differently from almost everyone around you. You are the bridge generation. Here's something that no other generation on Earth can say. You grew up in two completely different worlds, and you had to learn the rules of both. Your childhood was analog, slow, physical, real. Information lived in encyclopedias. Encarta on CD-ROM felt like magic. Road trips meant unfolding an enormous paper map on the kitchen table and tracing the route with your finger. If you got lost, you figured it out. No signal to lose, no GPS to blame. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. The internet arrived, then phones, then social media, then algorithms that knew what you wanted before you did, and you had to adapt, fast, while you were still becoming who you were. Psychologists call this being a bridge generation. You don't fully belong to the analog world. You don't fully belong to the digital one either. You live somewhere in between, comfortable in both, completely at home in neither. And that position costs something, because you are constantly switching between two different operating systems. One that moves slowly and values depth. One that moves fast and rewards visibility. And your brain has been running both simultaneously your entire adult life. That quiet sense of exhaustion you sometimes feel, that subtle feeling of being slightly out of place in the modern world, that's not a flaw. That's the weight of being the generation that remembers what was lost and still had to let it go. Boredom was your first teacher. Let's talk about something nobody gives enough credit to: boredom. Growing up in the 90s, boredom wasn't an emergency. There was no algorithm stepping in the second your attention dropped. No infinite scroll waiting in your pocket. If you were bored on a Saturday afternoon, you stayed bored until you did something about it. So you invented things. You replayed conversations in your head. You daydreamed. You went outside and made up games with rules that changed every 10 minutes. You occupied your own mind with nothing but your own mind. And here's what that did to you psychologically. It trained your nervous system to regulate itself. When there's nothing to distract you, the brain learns something crucial. That discomfort rises, peaks, and then fades on its own, without needing to be immediately numbed or escaped. That lesson, practiced over hundreds of boring Saturday afternoons, built a tolerance for stillness that most people today genuinely don't have. This is why silence doesn't scare you the way it scares other people. You can sit in a room with a friend, with a stranger, with yourself, and not feel the desperate urge to fill every gap. Silence, for you, isn't a warning sign. It's just air. That's not a small thing. That is a superpower in a world that has declared war on quiet. You learned how to wait, and that changed everything. Think about how much of the 90s was built around waiting. Waiting for your favorite song on the radio, ear pressed against the speaker, ready to hit record at exactly the right moment. Hoping the DJ wouldn't talk over the intro. That was an art form, a whole ritual. Waiting weeks to save enough allowance money for one CD. Waiting for the video store to get a copy of the movie back in stock. Waiting for that download bar to crawl across the screen, while also listening for any sound from the phone downstairs. Waiting was not a bug in the 90s. It was a feature. And psychologically, all of that waiting built something inside you that can't be downloaded or fast-forwarded into someone. Trust. Trust that what you want can exist without being immediately satisfied. Trust that desire doesn't have to destroy itself just because it isn't fulfilled right now. In adulthood, this shows up in quiet, powerful ways. You approach goals differently. You're willing to sit in the middle phase, that uncomfortable stretch where progress feels slow and invisible, without panicking. In relationships, you don't rush connection. You allow things to build. You don't need constant reassurance to know something is real. Compare that to a brain raised on instant delivery, swipe right decisions, and same-day everything. That brain has been trained to interpret delay as failure. Waiting feels like loss. Uncertainty feels like a threat. Your brain learned that waiting is survivable. That anticipation actually deepens desire rather than killing it. And that patience isn't weakness. It's just confidence that the thing you're waiting for is still coming. Your childhood had no record button, and that made you present. Here's something you probably never stop to think about. Your childhood doesn't exist on the internet. There are no Instagram stories from your 10th birthday. No TikToks of you and your friends messing around on a Saturday. No cloud backup of the exact moment you felt something for the first time. Saturday morning cartoons couldn't be rewound. Family moments weren't captured from 12 angles. If something happened, you had to be there for it. Your memory was the only archive. Your attention was the only record. And that built something in your nervous system that is genuinely rare now. Presence. Real, unperformed, unself-conscious presence. When you talk to someone, you're actually there. You're not half composing your response while they're still speaking. You're not mentally framing the moment for later. You're just in it. People notice this about 90s kids. There's a steadiness to them, a quality of attention that doesn't need to perform itself. You can be fully somewhere without broadcasting that you're there. In a world where everyone is constantly performing presence for an audience, the person who is simply present, without any performance, is almost magnetic. The hidden cost nobody talks about. Okay, here's the part that's going to feel a little uncomfortable, because it's not all superpowers. Growing up in the 90s also taught you to minimize yourself, to handle things quietly, to absorb discomfort without making a scene about it. You learned to be low maintenance because the world around you rewarded self-sufficiency. You figured things out on your own because there was no other option. And that's a strength until it isn't. Because sometimes, in adulthood, that same skill becomes a wall. You stop asking for help not because you don't need it, but because needing help feels foreign, uncomfortable, almost shameful. You've been so well trained to handle your own discomfort that you sometimes handle it alone when you don't have to. And there's something else, a quiet kind of displacement. You grew up in a world that moved at a certain rhythm, slower, more deliberate. Then the world shifted gears and kept shifting. And every single day you do this invisible recalibration between the pace you were born into and the pace the modern world demands. That recalibration is exhausting, and nobody really talks about it, because from the outside, you look completely fine. You are fine, but carrying the memory of a world that no longer exists and still having to function inside the one that replaced it takes something out of you, and it's okay to name that. You were the last to really live it. Here's the truth. People who grew up in the 90s occupy a position in history that will never exist again. You are the last generation to have a childhood that was fully offline, and the first to grow up into a world that is fully online. You carry both. You always will. And what that gave you, the ability to be present, to wait, to sit with boredom, to exist without an audience, those are not outdated skills. In the world we're living in right now, they might be the most important ones there are. So the next time someone tells you you're nostalgic, or stuck in the past, or that the 90s weren't actually that great, you can smile, because you're not stuck in the past. You were just shaped by it, and there's a difference. Drop a comment below. Tell me one memory from growing up in the 90s that you would never trade. One moment, one ritual, one weird little thing that shaped you. I want to read every single one.